Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to Pounds Invested. I'm your host, Stephen Georgiev. So, in today's video, we're going to talk about FIRE. No, not the stuff you get when you rub two sticks together in the forest. FIRE. Financial independence, retire early. So, in a world where pension ages only go upwards and people are always told that they're going to have to keep working for longer, does early retirement sound like a pipe dream? Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. All that has to happen for somebody to be able to retire is for their investment income to be equal to or larger than their living expenses. As soon as you reach that threshold where the amount of income your investments generate is the same or higher than your living expenses, that's it, you can afford to retire. But how do you get there? Well, for context, let's assume that we have an 8% annual return on our investment portfolio, an annual 2 to 3% inflation rate, and we need 3 or 4% of our investment value in order to live off per year. If that's the case, you would need between 25 and 33 times your annual living expenses saved up in your investment portfolio. How do you decide whether it should be 25 times your annual living expenses, 33 times your annual living expenses, or somewhere in between? Well, that's where we introduce a rule of thumb called the safe withdrawal rate. Now, the safe withdrawal rate is usually between 3 and 4%. It's the rate at which you can withdraw money from your portfolio, and yet it's going to keep growing fast enough so that the fact that you're withdrawing money doesn't actually change its value. How do you calculate a safe withdrawal rate? Well, let's say we have an annual return on our investment portfolio of 8% and an annual inflation rate of 2 to 3%. Let's deduct the annual inflation rate from the return on our portfolio. That leaves us with between 5 and 6% to play with. Now, from our 5 to 6%, let's deduct another 1 percentage point just to be on the safe side. Now that we've deducted inflation and an extra 1 percentage point just to be on the safe side from our annual return rate, we're left with about 4%. Now, that 4%, therefore, is the amount that we can safely withdraw from our portfolio without it decreasing in value. Because remember, we've already accounted for inflation and we've already accounted for an extra 1% just to be on the safe side. Now, there's a little bit of disagreement as to whether or not a safe withdrawal rate is 3%, 4%, or 5%. But let's say you're being super safe and you only want to be able to withdraw 3% from your portfolio annually. That would mean that you would need 33 times your annual living expenses saved up in your portfolio. Now, let's say you wanted to be able to withdraw an annual income of £40,000 into retirement. That would mean that your portfolio would have to be worth £1.2 million in order for you to be able to afford to retire. Now, clearly, the amount of money that people are going to want to withdraw annually in retirement is going to be different for each person. Somebody might want to be able to withdraw £60,000 or £70,000 or £80,000 annually into retirement, whereas somebody else might only need to withdraw £25,000 or £30,000 for retirement. In either case, whatever your number is, multiply it by between 25 and 33 in order to account for your safe withdrawal rate, whatever that is, whether it's 3%, 4%, or 5%. Once you've done that, you'll be able to calculate how much money you'll need to have saved up in order to be able to afford to retire. Now, stay with me here, guys. I get it. Having to save up over £1 million in order to be able to retire may sound like a pipe dream. But hear me out, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. On a very basic level, financial independence forces you to make a lifestyle choice. And the lifestyle choice is the following. Do I want to have to continue working into my 60s, my 70s, maybe by the time we millennials get there into our 80s, in order to be able to pay for the things that I bought in my 30s, my 40s, or my 50s? Or, on the other hand, am I happy to limit my spending in my 30s and my 40s in order to be able to retire a decade or maybe 2 decades or perhaps even longer before the traditional retirement age? Okay guys, now that I've told you it's theoretically possible to retire decades earlier than traditional retirement age would have you believe, how do you get there? So at this point in the video, that I'm going to ask you to smash the like button if you're enjoying the video and stick around, because now we're about to find out how you can actually get to financial independence. Now, there are 5 basic things you can do in order to get to financial independence sooner. The first one is actually more of a mindset shift, and it's developing what's known as a pay yourself first budget. But what does this mean? Well, the reality is, when most people get their paycheck at the end of the month, their first instinct is to spend it. After all, they think, I've earned this money, I'm well within my rights to start spending it, I'll worry about saving what's left later on. Now, those in the FIRE community flip this idea on its head. So, rather than spending first and then saving what's left, people in the FIRE community would rather set money aside first and then spend what's left. So you're paying yourself, you're putting money into your savings portfolio, into your investments, and then spending what's left. Now, the second thing that you can do to get to financial independence is absolutely crucial. Once you've set yourself a pay yourself first budget, you absolutely must take your monthly income, whatever that number is, and you deduct as big a percentage as possible that you can then set aside for your investment portfolio. Now, how big should this percentage be? Well, conventional wisdom says that you should aim to set aside between 15 and 20% of your monthly paycheck. And that's a very respectable number, let's be fair. But those in the FIRE community look at this 20% figure and they think, no, I can do way better than that. I'm going to aim to set aside 50, 60, even 70% of my monthly income in order to be able to shave years off my working life, so then I can retire sooner. So now that you've set yourself a pay yourself first budget and you've decided how much money of your monthly paycheck you're happy to set aside into investments, the second thing you can do is take an axe to your expenses. And the way to think about this is to isolate your 3 biggest expenses. Now, for most people, that's going to be housing, food, and transport. So whether that's a mortgage or rent, or an eating out budget, or spending on petrol or public transport, there are things you can do in each of these areas to reduce the amount you're spending. For example, let's look at housing. Now that a lot more people are working from home than they previously did, do we necessarily need to live close to where our jobs are? Or could we do them remotely using nothing more than a laptop and an internet connection? So if you happen to live in a high cost of living area like London or another big city, then perhaps you could move somewhere cheaper, be it even another country, and then work from there remotely. Now, let's look at food. If you're like most people, the first thing you'll do in the morning is, once you go out, you'll buy yourself a Starbucks coffee. And then the next thing you'll do at lunchtime is you'll go and buy yourself a lunch from somewhere around your place of work. Then in the evening, maybe you've decided, I don't really want to cook tonight, I'm going to get myself a takeaway. Well, if you think your daily coffee is costing you around about £3 or £4, your daily lunch out is costing you £8 to £10, and your takeaway could cost you £15, £20. Well, suddenly you've spent between £25 and £40 on what some people might call luxuries. So think about how you can cut these back. Could you make your own coffee in the mornings and take that with you? Could you make your own lunch and take that with you into work? Could you maybe reduce the amount of takeaways you get and start cooking more in the house, so therefore you reduce the amount of daily spending even further? Finally, let's look at transport. Now, transport is very much related to housing costs, because if you live near to your place of work and you have to go into your place of work, you have to get a car, then you have to insure the car, then you have to pay obviously for fuel for the car, then you have all these other expenses related to car ownership. Now, if you're able to use public transport, then you're still paying for your monthly tube pass or your monthly bus pass, or you still have expenses for Uber every day. But if you're able to work from home, you can drastically reduce your transport expenses, such that you might even be able to completely eliminate transport from your budget. Now, let's think about this for a second. If you've drastically reduced your housing expenses by not having to live near your office, and you've drastically reduced your food bill by not eating out as much, and you've drastically reduced your transport spending by, again, not having to live near your office and actually being able to work from home, then what you're doing is you're giving yourself ammunition which you can then use for investing. And then once you invest that money, you can get towards early retirement years quicker than you would be able to otherwise. So what have we done so far? Well, hopefully we've smashed the like button for this video, and we've set ourselves a pay yourself first budget. We've taken an axe to our expenses. Now, the third thing we can do is increase our income. And there are a few easy ways we can do this. Everyone has a skill they can teach someone else. Be it language skills, be it sewing skills, be it fitness, anything that you can do, you can teach somebody else to do. Now, let's be honest, guys, everybody has stuff in their house which they haven't touched for a year, which they maybe haven't used in 2 years, and which they maybe bought 3 or more years ago and already forgotten about. Just think, if you were able to turn some of that stuff back into cash, and then you could invest that cash, how awesome would that be? You'd clear up more space in your house, and you'd also give yourself money which you can then use to put towards financial independence. Now, the fourth thing we can do to get to financial independence sooner is to get financially literate. Now, I don't mean that you should take financial advice from a slightly dodgy uncle in the pub who's drunkenly telling you that's a really good idea to invest in his best friend from high school's new motor mechanic shop down the road. No, I mean genuine financial advice. Now, there are loads of sources of financial advice. You can go online, you can get yourself a PDF of The Millionaire Next Door, or The Millionaire Fast Lane, or The Second Bounce of the Ball, Turning Risk into Opportunity. Now, I'll post links to all of these in the description, but what I'm saying, guys, is it's absolutely crucial that you get financially literate so you can track your progress on this journey. And the fifth thing you absolutely have to do in order to get to financial independence sooner is to actually start investing the money you've set aside. So it's absolutely crucial that your money works for you harder than you work for yourself. Ultimately, you want to be in a situation whereby your investment portfolio earns more money in annual returns than you do from working for a year. So how do you make sure your money is working for you even when you're not working? Well, one of the really easy and low-cost ways of doing this is by investing in index funds, which generate an annual return of roughly 6 to 9% per year. And if you want to know where to get started with index funds, hit the link up here and go and watch my tutorial on index funds. So guys, in my next video, I'm going to go one stage further. I'm going to specifically break down how you can use an ISA, that's an individual savings account, and a SIP, that's a self-invested personal pension, in order to be able to retire sooner. So to find out how to build your portfolio so that you can reach financial independence and retire sooner, make sure to check out my next video in a few days' time, and I'll see you then.